welcome to the Woollen Hearted podcast. My name is Fran and this is episode 12, 13, not too sure. It's been a really long time, hasn't it? Podcast for me to share some of my passions in the domain of handwork and needlecraft, so crochet, knitting, spinning and embroidery will all feature today. It's May the 5th, 2023 and it's been over a year since I last filmed. So welcome here if you're new and welcome back if you are one of the lovely folks who have followed my podcasting journey thus far. I can't quite believe it, but it's actually been 5 years since I recorded my very first podcast, which was in the month of May, and yeah, it feels really strange to think it's a project that's been going on for so long, but it's been rather intermittent, as if you go back through my archives you will see. The main reason for that primarily is I'm a young mum with 2 small children who are coming up for 8 and 4. And so, well, as you can imagine, or we may be able to imagine, as a caregiver, there's not always heaps of time to do extra things, and I would rather prioritise my handwork and my craft practices. But the other reason is also because I suffer with chronic illness and I have had quite tricky health over the last 4 years, particularly, and over the last 4 years in general, and particularly in the last year, which explains my absence here. So I won't go into it too much. Excuse me, that's my husband. There we go. Yes, I was just about to very briefly explain that I've had very poorly health with my bipolar disorder in the last year, which has resulted in me being hospitalised twice, first in September for 3 weeks and then since February, and then I've actually been out 1 week after a 2.5 month stay. So I was sent to hospital in February, and I have been there for 2.5 months. But I was allowed to come home a week ago, and I'm just now in a period of convalescence and rest and recuperation, and I'm taking things really slowly. I'm feeling much better, much stronger than I was, thankfully, when I went in, thankfully, than a year ago. But I have got to take things slowly. So I was very inspired by memories of my mum talking about my grandfather, her father, when he came back from the Second World War as a prisoner of war. He had very poorly health, and once the sort of acute phase was over and he was still in hospital recovering, he was taught, or he taught himself, I'm not quite sure, how to make rag rugs. And it was his sort of convalescent project, and I believe he then continued to make rugs when he went home. And I was thinking a lot about him whilst coming to the end of my stay in hospital, my granddad, and this story that my mum had told me, and I thought it would be a really lovely project to begin a blanket. I would love to do rag rugging one day, but just at the moment I need to not add any new handcrafts to my strings to my bow. But I do love to crochet, and I think crochet is just such a restful, relaxing, uplifting thing. And I did quite a bit of crochet in hospital. I actually taught a fellow patient how to crochet, and I just heard from them this morning, and they are doing really well. They're still in hospital, but in a different hospital now, but they're able to do crochet a little bit in the afternoons like we were able to together. And they are working on a hat at the moment in crochet, so that made me feel really happy to think about them. So I had a rifle through my stash when I came home from hospital, because that was one of the things, it sounds silly, but I really missed my stash when I was away. I think a bit like how an artist misses their full palette of paints perhaps when they're on holiday and they only take a few with them. I really did miss having access to all my yarn, because I just love it, and it fills me with such joy just to have it, and then to dream about projects I want to do, and also I find a lot of inspiration in there. So when I came back last week, I immediately went into the box I had been thinking about, and I started a crochet project last weekend. So this is how far I've got so far. I have 2 squares that are just waiting for their ends to be put in, and I have one on my lap. So I am in a granny square frenzy at the moment. I'll just show you the ones I've made. So these are all made from precious stash yarns. Some of them are naturally dyed. So this is naturally dyed with weld. This is naturally dyed with weld and indigo. This was with madder, and this was with logwood. But this one is some Isle yarn. We have a lovely yellow one. Some red, so there's a little bit of handspun. This one's handspun the green around, and it's just going to be a lovely blanket of memories of this time of recovery, and the fact that I'm home, and hopefully now know where I'm going. I'm always going to have bipolar as part of my life, but it doesn't have to be the be-all and end-all, hopefully, going forward. I'm on new medication now, and that's hopefully making a difference. And I just want this to be a memory of that time. And blankets are so warm and cozy and comforting, and I can just imagine being cuddled up on the sofa with this in the winter, or even if it just ends up being a lap blanket. I'm really happy for that. So yes, that's my crochet blanket. So I just want to show you the very first granny square I made last week, which now I look at it, it's a bit wobbly. I can just see a little error here. But this square I was so proud of, and it is my absolute favourite square of going to be the whole blanket, because it was the first time I mastered the granny square properly. And I've been using a pattern, just a pattern of how to make a granny square from my crochet Bible book, which is by Jane Crowfoot, I believe. Crowfoot? Yes, I think so. I just used the diagram, and I found the diagram really helpful, and I finally understood why in the past my granny square blankets and squares have not worked. It's because I didn't do the moving up to the next round correctly, and I didn't have a chain in between each cluster. So I'm really excited. I'm trying to sew in my ends as I go, so I perhaps crochet 3 or 4, and then I'll sew in the ends, and then I block wash and block them, and I cannot believe the difference that makes to the finished square. So this is one that I did yesterday, so you can see it's sort of rounded on the edges, and when it's washed and blocked, it's flat and it feels plump. And this is a knitting podcast, so I'm sure you know about what happens when we wash and block our knits, and blocking it out means the nice square shape. And yeah, but I didn't realise it would make such a difference, and I'm so chuffed with it. And I love the way I'm working in the ends as I go, because if I had all of that to deal with at the end of the project, I think it would be a bit overwhelming. Whereas here I've only got a few ends to do each time, and I just put a podcast on and just work on it. So yes, I've got one on the go, which I may pick up again in a minute. I'm just doing the last round, so I'm doing 5 rounds on each square, and then I'm considering joining them as I go. So what I would do is have a contrast yarn, probably off-white, and I would crochet the clusters, the granny clusters around, and then I would attach it to another one, and they would be attached by granny cluster. So I probably wouldn't put the 2 yellows together, but there would be a nice border around each one. So I've just been experimenting a little bit, but again, that's new to me, so I'm just learning at the moment. I'll just show you. I've got a little basket. I find baskets much easier to work with. Please excuse the mess in there, but there's some examples of some of the little yarns I'm using. So some of it is embroidery yarn, wool yarn that's come from a thrift shop. So like this one. There's some naturally dyed scraps. There's some leftover from projects, that's also Isle yarns, and I absolutely love this green, it's my favourite. And little bits of Handspun as well, so yeah. Crochet, I love it. I'd love, love, love to make a crochet garment next. Hello, it's alright. I saw you coming, so I'm still filming, but I'll just do a pause. Have some tea as well. I'm drinking from one of my favourite cups from my childhood, which my dad very kindly brought out for me. He's come to visit to give us a hand with the children, and he's brought a few treats from home, some tea and curry paste because I love curry paste from Britain, and my mother-in-law was here whilst I was in hospital, and she kindly left some lovely tisane, so herbal tea. And this is verveine, which I think is viburnum, I'm not too sure, but it's very relaxing. It's the holidays here, the school holidays for the spring break, so there's a lot of tourists driving past at this time of day. It's a little bit noisy, so I apologise for the motorbikes being noisy. So my other project, which I began at the weekend, is a sock, and it's living in this beautiful project bag that my parents very kindly gave me for my birthday. It's by a British maker called Tea Cake and Make, and if I could, I would have absolutely everything that she makes. I love, love, love all of her project bags and her needle cases, and I love the spotty fabric. I love the outside floral fabric. It really reminds me of Art Nouveau wallpaper. It's got lovely leather drawstring, and something I love is it has has a little keychain for your stitch markers, and it came with this beautiful little dragonfly progress keeper, which I just thought was so lovely. So yes, that's Tea Cake and Make, and this was a gift from my parents for my birthday. And inside is a sock project. Oh, that's bright. And it's not just any sock, this is a hand-spun sock. So let me just get to the right place so I can show you better. If you did watch my last podcast, whether you watched it a year ago or you watched it last week, you'll see me talking about my hand spinning from last winter, last February. And I was telling you about this sock yarn that I had made. So this one here, oh, it's a bit of a tangle in there, which is spun from Suffolk, which is the greyish brown, and Cheviot, and it's a 3-ply, traditional 3-ply yarn, so 2 strands of the browny grey and 1 strand of the Cheviot. And with the leftover Cheviot, I spun up. I naturally dyed what was left of the top, and then I spun up another 3-ply yarn, so you can see the yarn there. Ooh. And I was really really pleased with this yarn. It's the best yarn I think I've ever made. It's my first time doing a 3-ply that I was really happy with. I've done very little 3-ply yarns, constructions. I generally just prefer 2-ply, not through laziness, but just I prefer knitting with it. And it came out as, I would say, a heavy fingering. I was aiming for fingering, but I think it's a heavy fingering, light sport weight. And the idea was to knit a sock, and I hadn't yet mask in my project bag. I hadn't yet started working with it because, well, just not very well. I now have, since Sunday, a sock. So let me just finish off this decrease. I'm just on the instep decrease, and so I'm knitting this on size 2.5, I think, possibly 2.75. I've just turned the heel. Oops, can't really see that. I've just turned the heel. I've just picked up the instep and the foot, and I'm now just working on the instep. So they're going to be quite short because I was worried I didn't have enough yarn, because although I span 150 grams of the Suffolk mix, see, I do only have this. I can't remember the yardage, but I did keep it in my spinning journal, so I'll put it down below. What I really should have done was attempt toe-up socks, but I've never actually done them before. I do have a pattern. I have the Drea Renee Knits Everyday Sock pattern, but I haven't started it yet, and I didn't want to have to think about what I was doing. I just wanted to knit. So I cast this on Sunday. There is a little error in my ribbing on the cuff. There's a 4 instead of a 2, but I don't mind. There's always some error on my sock, and it's quite alright by me. This way I'll know it's my left one, because I always like to make the left sock first. And then I tend to wear it on the left, so I'll know which one's the left. But I'm really happy with it, and I'm knitting my favourite pattern by the basic sock pattern by Church Mouse Yarn Company, I think it is. I've often knitted the DK version of their pattern. It comes in a fingering and a DK, and this is the fingering weight version, so I think I just slightly changed the needle size, but these fit beautifully so far, so I'm not worried. And I have knitted a pair of Handspun socks in the fingering weight size before, but those were Corriedale spun as a 2-ply. Actually did I talk about them on the podcast? I can't really remember. Possibly. If I did, what I'll do is I'll put a link to my Ravelry page. And I love having just a very basic sock on the go. Do you do that too? It's just so lovely to have this in my bag, in my lovely project bag, and just being able to pick it up and knit on it when I want, when I'm out. I cast this on at the swimming pool on Sunday when we took the children. I didn't go in, I didn't knit this in the pool, but I casted it on the side, and it was lovely just to sit there listening to some music, watching the children and knitting with this lovely bright and cheerful yarn. So yes, that's what's on my needles and hook at the moment, and I think now I will put my sock down. I've just come to the end of the row, and I will show you something I finished while I was away. So whilst I was away over the summer, I finally got around to casting back on a jumper for my husband, and this was from yarn that was, I suppose you could say, the founding yarn of my stash that I had bought. Well, it's now 9 years ago, but at the time it was 8 years ago, and it's yarn from a French yarn producer called Ardelaine. Yarn producer because they are a mill that has a very sort of political, militant role in helping to re-establish the French spinning industry here in France. And there's this incredible book that you can read about how the mill was set up in the 70s and the people who set it up, the founding members of the mill, and how it was linked to an eco-village. And yeah, the history of the mill is fascinating. I lent the book actually to a friend, and I should get it back from her. So yes, I knit this jumper once before for my husband in this yarn. I'll show you the jumper, just find the front. So it's a very simple, very simple jumper. I think it was knit on size 4.5 needles, so it's a worsted weight. Wonderful grey, natural grey, and this is the Papa Bear sweater, which is a pattern by Clara Parks, and it's from her book, The Knitter's Book of Wool, and it was the first book I brought about wool, and it was the first wool I brought, and I had always intended to make this jumper for my husband, but at the time I was too nervous to cast it on after I originally received the yarn. And so a year later I cast it on, so in 2015 I think, but I was a young mum by that time. I had a small baby, and it took me a whole year to knit the pieces. So you knit a front, a back and the 2 sleeves. And by the time I got to the end of the pieces being made and I tried to seam it up, it was all wrong. The sleeves didn't fit, and I realised I had been knitting with one 4mm and the other 4.5mm needle, but not in the right way round, because I know now you can do that. And so I undid it all, I unravelled it, and I put it in the naughty corner, and I've not had the courage to knit for him since. And last summer I decided, right, I am going to knit this jumper, I'm going to conquer my fear, and I cast it on and I knitted it within a month. And I'm really pleased with the result. It's come out possibly a little bit bigger than he would have liked. I did base his measurements on one of his favourite jumpers, but I didn't realise that that jumper was also a little bit baggy, because I casted it on whilst they were away, and I was on my own at home. But apart from that, it's come out really well, and he has been wearing it all winter, and I can just see it's just starting to peel a little bit on the arms, but this wool is French, breed specific, hardy, rustic, Ardèche breed wool, and it's just perfect for jumpers, and it's the perfect colour. And actually I'll just put it on because actually I could wear it, but I didn't have the heart to take it off him. So there's just a slight bit of pilling starting there, but it's very, very slight. It has a lovely neckline that's not too tight, too high, and when he wears it with a scarf, which I made him a scarf, a handspun scarf, he's really warm, and this has kind of been his uniform all winter. So I would like to knit one for me actually, and I think I could knit this size and it would fit me perfectly. This is the medium size. I've got the same yarn but in a lighter sort of beigey colour, which is called Draille, and it's using a slightly different local breed, which gives it's mixed with white, and then it's a sheep that's got a kind of a beige, light beige coloured fleece. So I think I would actually like, now as I'm talking, I was going to use that yarn for something else, but actually why not knit something that's tried and tested and that fits me. So yeah, really pleased. This is the Papa Bear sweater, so I'd really like to make myself, there is a Mama Bear sweater and a Baby Bear sweater in the pattern book, but I don't really like the Mama Bear. It's sort of a ribbed jumper, although saying that, it is quite nice. Maybe I'll knit that after, but perhaps I'll knit myself one of these. I'm going to try to keep this on. It is a sort of a warm, muggy afternoon. I'll see if I sit still, if I can keep it on. I have two bears here that you haven't actually seen before, and I will talk about them more next time, but we have two bear friends who are Poppy, who's the girl bear, in a lovely little linen dress, and she's got a woolly mammoth fibres indigo dyed little neck scarf, and this is her twin brother Percy, and these are prototype bears that I made back in the autumn, and these have been my hospital bears whilst I've been away. So I had difficulty doing any knitting whilst in hospital, concentrating on anything sort of for myself or for the children, and I only had limited amounts of yarn, so I ended up knitting things for the bears, and perhaps next time, if that interests you, I'll show you what I was making. Leave it there. Ooh. I think I will leave it there, as I've been waffling for rather a long time, but I want to thank you for coming back, I want to thank you for being with me. I'm not sure when I'll be back next, but I hope it's not too long a time, and next time I come I'll hopefully have some new things to show you that I've been working on, that I've casted on. I hope to have some finished socks, and perhaps I'll talk a little bit more about my bears then. Bye bye, and see you again really soon. This is a podcast for me to share some of my passion. Ooh!